Hey guys, I'm Jeremy Yoder from Mad Scientist Barbecue, and I'm going to show you how to make a perfect Texas-style brisket on your Pits and Spits pellet cooker. Now, before we get started cooking, let me go over the things that you're going to need. The first and most important thing is a whole packer-cut brisket. It looks like this. Then you're going to need some salt and pepper. For Texas-style brisket, you use only salt and pepper, and a 50-50 ratio is more common. Some people do 60% pepper, but as a standard, let's start off with 50-50. That's the one that gets used the most often, and it's my favorite way to do it. Now, it's very important that you don't use regular table salt because the grains are much smaller, it's much more dense, and you can easily oversalt the meat, and it's hard to see it when it falls on the meat, so it's hard to keep track of how much salt is actually present. The next thing is the pepper should be coarse ground black pepper. Don't use the fine ground. Again, it could be too peppery. 16 mesh is the standard size for this coarse ground black pepper. If you get coarse ground, it's probably close enough, but if you can find something that says 16 mesh, use that. Next, you need a spray bottle, and I like to fill it with 50% apple cider vinegar and 50% water. Now, to make something a Texas-style brisket, you have to use pink butcher paper. You're also going to need a digital instant read thermometer. There are several good brands out there, but make sure that it's high quality and reads quickly, because you don't want to have to leave your thermometer in there for 45 seconds before it gives you an accurate temperature. So get something that reads quickly and is durable, because if you mess up something while you're trying to barbecue, you don't want it to be the fault of the equipment. You want it to be your fault. You don't want your equipment to fail you. That's the last thing you ever want to happen, especially when you invest the time and money to do something like this. So good quality thermometer, and those are the tools that you're going to need to do this right. Now we got to trim it up. On the top side, we have a fat cap here. We're going to trim that down to 1/4 of an inch. On the bottom side, we have the meat side, and we're going to leave this almost untouched. We're going to take this chunk of fat and we're going to try to trim it down. You'll see exactly what that looks like at the end. And then finally, something that I recommend is any thin part of the flat right here, we're going to trim off. So the line that I would take would probably be something like this, because a lot of times this won't survive such a long cook. One important note for those of you who don't know, this thicker part of the brisket is called the point. The thinner part is called the flat. The point actually has two muscles that come together with a layer of fat in between, so it's fattier and can take more abuse and punishment from the heat. And the flat is much leaner, and it's got still the layer of fat on top, but it's never going to be able to take the same kind of extended heat and high temperatures that the point can take. So be mindful of that. It's a very uneven cut of meat, and so you have to treat it in a way that both of them get done at the correct time. All right, here's the brisket after trimming. It's not uncommon to hit a couple bald spots, so if you hit the meat underneath, then just lift your knife and start going higher up, and you stop, cutting into the meat there. But that's not uncommon. It'll be okay if you have a few of those. Don't worry too much about that. You don't want extended portions where the meat is exposed, though. I trimmed a little bit of this out, and then I didn't want to gouge this by trimming a huge pocket there. So if there's some hanging off, take that off. And then finally, on the underside, I trimmed a chunk of this fat off because it's going to be really hard, not the kind of thing you want to eat. And then if you have big chunks of fat on the underside, you can trim that off, or you can leave them on. They're so small, and they usually render away to nothing anyway. So it's just, if you want to, go for it, if you want to spend the time. But if not, there's no harm, no foul. Now we're ready to season, and so let's get started. Now that we've got a nice even coat on here, it's time to put it on the smoker. And I'll be putting it on at 250 degrees, and then I'll reevaluate in about an hour to see if anything's getting too crusty. Then I'll drop the temperature down to 225. If it looks like it's not really starting to bark up very well, I'll move it up to 275. It depends on things like humidity and the nature of this brisket and the kind of pellets you're using. But one thing I will say is get good, high quality pellets. Not all pellets are created equal. Get the good ones, the ones that are made with no fillers, and they're not made with wood oils or anything like that. But get high quality stuff, and you'll be rewarded with superior flavor in the end. Now when I put the brisket in the smoker, what I did, because the deflector plate is at an angle, I put the point on the side where the deflector plate is higher, because you're going to get some radiant heat from that, and the best thing to absorb that would be the point, because there's more fat there, it can take more punishment, it can deal with more radiant heat. Because the flat is leaner and thinner, I put it on the side where the deflector plate is lower, so it gets less radiant heat, and this way we'll get more even cooking. Now, the temperature difference from one side to the other on this thing is phenomenally small. I mean, there's not much in terms of temperature that's different, it's just a difference in a little bit of radiant heat. Now, regardless, you can put the brisket in there in any orientation and it's probably going to be fine because this thing is so even. But if we're trying to make minute adjustments to get the best brisket possible, that's how I'd recommend putting it in. Now we will wait for an hour. I'll come back in an hour and take a peek to make sure we're starting to get good bark and nothing's burning. And then at that point, if it looks good and we don't change the temperature, we're going to let it ride for another 2 hours, have a full 3 hours on the smoke before I open that lid. Okay, it's been a little over an hour now, so let's take a peek at what this brisket looks like. We are looking for hopefully some bark and reddish color, and then also to make sure nothing is burning and that everything is still soft. When cooking a brisket, you have a long time to wait. And one thing that I want to mention now is the quality of brisket that you get. You get what you pay for when you buy brisket. So if you get a select brisket, the lowest grade, you're going to have a really hard time making it juicy. If you buy a choice brisket, it'll be easier for sure, and you can make a lot of great brisket with choice quality meat. And then if you get prime, there is still a distinct difference between using prime and choice. You have a lot better moisture content because of the intramuscular marbling, the fat within the muscle of the meat. Get the best brisket you can afford. It's been a little bit over 5 hours, and at about 3 hours in, we started spraying this brisket. And the thing about spraying is you don't want to spray the fat because you want that to stay hot and you want it to render really well. You want to spray all of the meat parts. So all of the exposed meat that you see, you want to spray that to keep it soft so it doesn't burn, it doesn't get too crusty. Now I've sprayed the exposed meat and everything is still looking pliable, still looking nice and soft, but bark is really starting to form now. And the next time we'll bring you back will be when it's time to wrap. Now we have a great bark on the outside of this brisket, so that means we're ready to wrap. The other things I look for are the fat to be rendered. That means if I push on it, it kind of gives way and it's nice and soft. And those are the important things. And then also the last thing you want to check for is temperature. So we're looking for a temperature of probably about 175 degrees. So you could wrap as low as 165 or as high as even 190. But probably about 175 degrees is where these things all come together. So to make sure nothing gets too hard, we're going to spray the meat side again. Now after spraying, we just wrap it in a double layer of butcher paper. Now it goes back on the smoker until when we stick in the temperature probe, it feels like butter. It'll probably take about another hour or so for this thing to be finished up. We're looking for a temperature around 203, maybe 205, maybe even as low as 200. But we're going to be checking to know when we're in the ballpark, and then when it goes in and just smooth and easy, like it's going through a stick of softened butter, we know we're done. When the flat and the point both felt like butter, when I probed them, I believe that the flat was 204 and the point was 201. We pulled it off and we put it in a cooler to rest for an hour. At that point, we pulled it out and let it come down to be about 150 degrees. So anywhere between 140 degrees and 150 degrees is about the right temperature to slice it. Now, as is often the case when cooking a brisket, we're dealing with failing light as we finish up, so bear with us on that. But this should be a perfectly cooked brisket. Hopefully we have great bark, and I'm looking forward to the smoke flavor that we were able to get. The way I like to slice the brisket is to start on this side and work my way to the other side. And then usually I take this and I cut it into a couple tasty bites. And set that aside, and now we cut our slices. About 1/4 inch thick. At this point, we rotate 90 degrees when we have the two muscles together, and we keep slicing. All right, so this tells us how we did. Here we see beautifully rendered fat on the top. We have lots of moisture running through the meat, and then we have dark bark on the top to tell us we have lots of flavor. Here we have a piece of the flat. It looks nice and moist still, which is hard to do, but if you render the fat properly, you're going to have moist brisket. So let's give it a taste test. But first, let's give it a pull test. So it shouldn't fall under its own weight, but it should pull with a slight tug. Yeah, that's perfect. All right, let's test out this flat. I'm going to take a bite with a lot of bark where all that flavor accumulates. Here we go. It's amazing you can create that kind of flavor with a pellet grill. Add in a little bit of salt and pepper from the rub. It's a beautiful, perfect complement. Here we have a piece from the point, and we're going to taste that as well. Different grain, different texture, and here we have a lot of bark, which is what I love. So let's try it out and see how it tastes. Here we go. Even better than the flat. It's perfectly rendered intramuscular marbling. When you dream of brisket, this is the bite you dream of. A lot of times on pellet cookers, you don't get clear smoke flavor. On this, that's not a problem. This is beautiful. You guys need to try this. Get out there with your Pits and Spits pellet grill and cook a brisket. Salt and pepper, good quality pellets. It'll be a treat for you and your family.